You ever felt like you were running from something? And maybe not like a marathon running from something, but like maybe running from past decisions or possibly running from who you used to be. And that's where we find Jacob. He's running from his own deception. He's running from the mess that he's made. And he's running from a brother who wants to kill him. You know, we've talked for the last couple of weeks about how Jacob got to this place. And I'll regroup that in just a second. But he's about to run straight into God's grace. Jacob was a man on the run, both literally and spiritually. And let's go to Genesis 28. Genesis 28, we're going to read, first of all, verses 10 and 11. Genesis 28, verses 10 and 11. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. And at sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up camp, and he stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. This passage right here tells us that Jacob was on the move. Not just for a nice vacation was he on the move. He was running for his life. You see, we talked about in the first 2 weeks how Jacob had tricked his brother Esau out of both his birthright and the father's blessing. Now, Esau was a hunter. That means he was probably pretty strong. He was probably pretty fast. It definitely meant he had some sharp weapons. And Jacob was afraid of him. Because Jacob, he was more of a stay in the kitchen with mama and, perfect your lentil soup kind of guy. Smooth chest. Stayed among the tents. So when Esau vowed revenge, Jacob was scared. And he did what any other younger brother who was scared would do. He ran like his sandals was on fire. He's scared. He's literally scared to death of Esau, and he's running through the wilderness, and he's getting tired. Jacob was raised in a wealthy household. Now, he's not a camper. I'm not a camper either, by the way. I mean, you guys that go camping, I respect that. If you want to pretend like you're homeless, go ahead and pay to do it. I'll take a 5-star resort because that's what Michelle wants. And I'll try to provide whatever she wants. But he's a mama's boy. And now he's out here in the middle of nowhere sleeping in the dirt. He's exhausted. The desert is dark. And he doesn't have a hotel reservation. So what does he do? He grabs, this has always been funny to me. He grabs a rock for a pillow. And in the middle of nowhere. And crashes. Now, I don't know how tired you got to be for a rock to look comfortable. But Jacob was at that level. And in this lonely, uncomfortable place, God shows up. Kind of like Forrest Gump, remember that? Anyway, the moral of the story, sometimes God meets you when you're at rock bottom. Y'all get that? He's sleeping on rock bottom. I worked on that. Yeah, I need to work some more on it. Hey, Daddy said don't ever tell a joke that ain't that funny more than once. So I'll leave that one alone from now on. But he'll let you hit rock bottom just to show you that he is the rock at the bottom. Amen. And some of you are wondering why life feels so hard right now. And you feel like you've lost your security. And you feel like you've lost your comfort. And you feel like you've lost your peace. But let me ask you this. Could it be that God had to strip away all your safety nets just so you would finally hear his voice? Happened to me. Back in the early 2000s, I remember I was heavily involved in youth ministry, and our youth pastor would ask me, say, well, we need you to go on this trip. Can you go? And I'd say, no, man, I'm 2 months behind at work. I don't have time to go. And he'd ask me on the next one, what about this one? Can you help us on this one? No, man, I'll be here on Wednesday nights, but I can't go on these trips because I'm too busy. And then the Great Recession hits, and I found out that God can make you not busy. And it seemed as if God stripped away all the stuff that was busy so that I could hear his voice. I can remember going, I had a key to the church, and I would go in because I was working at Walmart every night stocking shelves because my business couldn't afford to pay me. And I walked, and I remember going in at 2 o'clock in the morning every single night and praying, God, if you'll give me my business back, I'll never use it again as an excuse to not do what you want me to do. God can make you not busy, and he can strip away all the stuff that you think is a priority. So Jacob thinks he's running from his brother. Really, he's running straight into an encounter with God. A ladder to heaven. That's a new one. Talk about a weird dream. Let's look in verse 12. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from earth up to heaven, and saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. I do not know if this was the inspiration for Led Zeppelin's song or not. It might have been. But Jacob dreams of a ladder or a stairway that's stretching from earth to heaven with angels going up and down on it. Now, I've got some questions about that. Why was all these angels going up and down? Was it shift change? Were they changing shifts, or were they exercising? Were they running up and down the steps? I don't know. Why a staircase? Why not an escalator? Why not a heavenly elevator with praise music, playing in the background? But God doesn't do things the way we expect. But that stairway was a symbol. It was a connection between heaven and between earth. If they did have praise music, I believe they'd have our praise band playing in the background. I'm telling you, y'all doing a great job every single week. And a lot of times I think that we maybe don't put enough emphasis on praise and worship, but remember, they are creating the atmosphere that the Holy Spirit can work in. He said that he inhabits the praises of his people. And when we get up here and they do what they do on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday nights, and they create that atmosphere, it's an atmosphere of healing. It's an atmosphere of miracles. It's an atmosphere where the Holy Spirit comes to visit us, and he does it all the time because he said that he would. He said he inhabits the praises of our people. And then I watch people coming in after the first song's over, and I'm thinking, man, y'all just missed so much. Why are you cheating yourself? You need to be here before praise and worship starts so that you can get your head right. You can just leave all your junk out there somewhere and leave all your stress and leave all the stuff that's keeping you from an encounter with God, and get in here. Get in here and worship him. Go after him with all you got. And don't be ashamed of it. Don't be, I don't know what the cost of your praise is. I jump up and down like a pogo stick because I can't help it. He's done a lot for me. I paid a price for that praise. And be here. That wasn't in my notes. But let's be honest. The ladder was a symbol. And God was showing Jacob that he wasn't some distant, uninvolved deity. No, heaven was reaching down to earth. And God was reminding Jacob that I am here with you. I'm not just up there somewhere. I'm right here. And to be honest, Jacob needed to hear that. He probably felt like God was 1,000,000 miles away. After all, Jacob had messed up. He had lied to his parents. He'd lied to his dad, and he'd cheated his brother. He had stolen a birthright. He had stolen a blessing. If ever there was a least likely to be blessed award, Jacob would have been in the running. But God wasn't done with him. And if you ever felt like God's given up, think again. If God can show up to a runaway con artist sleeping on a rock then he can show up for you. Jacob's in the lowest place of his entire life. And God shows up in a dream. But look at the image. It's not a lecture. It's not lightning and fire. It's not a rebuke for all the deception. It was a stairway. If I had been God, I would have been lecturing him. I would have been coming up with some lightning and some thunders and some some tornadoes to prove who I was and chastise him for everything that he had done. But that's not the way God did it. He shows him a connection between heaven and earth. And it's like God saying, you think I'm far away, but I've actually built a bridge between me and you. You think you're alone, but I'm still right here. And then it gets even crazier. 2,000 years later, Jesus steps onto the scene, and he says in John 1:51, it says, then he said, I tell you the truth, that you will all see heaven open and the angels of God going up and down on the Son of Man, the one who is the stairway between heaven and earth. Jesus calls himself the stairway. Some of y'all grew up thinking that you had to climb your way to God. Like if you prayed more, you could get there. If you read more, you could get there. If you gave more, you could get there. If you served more, then you could get there. Then maybe you could reach him. But Jesus said, you don't climb up to me. I come down to you. You don't need to build a way to God. He already built a way to you. It's just like when Peter had denied Jesus 3 times and he goes out. Jesus is dead now, he thinks. Jesus is crucified. And Peter says, I'm going fishing. I'm going back to my old life. And you can do that. Peter didn't catch nothing that night. You can go back to your old life if you want to. You just won't be any good at it anymore. And Jesus comes up and he's cooking breakfast. He's cooking fish that they can't catch. They've been fishing all night. Jesus is on the beach cooking fish. And he says, children, do you have any meat? Have you caught anything? They immediately recognize his voice. Peter immediately gets buttergut because he knows that he denied him. He knows he betrayed him. And now he's looking at a dead man. Can you imagine what that would have felt like? This man that you said that you would die for, this man that you said you'd give up everything for, and now you denied him 3 times, and now here he is. You watched him die, but he's standing here. I would have been nervous. And Jesus walks over, and he says, throw your nets on the other side. Peter's got to be thinking, we've heard this before. The last time we did this, we almost sunk the boat. But he did it, and they almost sunk the boat. and they dragged this net up on the beach, and there's I forgot how many, something 52, either 150, was it 152 fish, I think, or 300, I don't know. But there was a bunch of fish. And Jesus walks over, I believe he walks over, and he kicks one of them fish, and he says, Peter, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than your old life? And Peter says something interesting, and I know you've heard this before, but I'm going to remind you of it. He says, do you agape me? Do you love me? But he used the word agape, and Peter says, I phileo you. I care about you. And Jesus once again comes up and he says, Peter, do you love me more than these? Do you agape love me? And Peter says, I phileo, I love you like a brother. And the last time Jesus asked him, he comes up and he says, Peter, do you phileo me? Do you love me? Brotherly love. See, Peter couldn't get to where God was. He couldn't get to where Jesus was, so Jesus came down to where he was, and Peter says, I love you. And Peter went on to change the world. God's promise. He's already built a way to you. He says, I've got you covered. Let's look at verses 13 through 15. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I'm giving it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and the east, to the north and the south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I'm with you. I will protect you wherever you go. One day I'll bring you back to this land and will not leave you until I've finished giving you everything that I've promised you. Do you see it? Do you see it? See, Jacob thought he was lost, but God said, I still got a plan. Jacob thought he was alone, but God said, I'm with you. Jacob thought he was done, but God said, I'm not finished. God's promise is bigger than your past. God speaks directly to Jacob. Now let's be real. If you're Jacob, I'd probably be expecting a divine lightning bolt, a strongly worded email from heaven. Dear Jacob, your behavior has been reviewed. And unfortunately, your membership in the Blessed Family Club has been revoked. That's what I would have done if I was God. If I looked at one of my kids that had done what Jacob had done, I'd be mad. I would have demanded some kind of punishment. I would have done something. But no, God just gives Jacob an incredible promise. Why? Because the family blessing, the birthright, meant something. And even though Jacob should have been born into it, he had it. And that's when God became the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He said, I'm going to give you and your descendants this land. So he promised him land. He said, your family is going to be as numerous as the dust of the earth. He promised him descendants. He said, all the people on the earth is going to be blessed through you. So he promised that he would be a blessing to others. And he said, I'm with you and I'll watch over you wherever you go. He promised his presence. And that last one's my favorite. Because it means that no matter where Jacob runs to, whether to Haram or back home or anywhere else, God's not going to leave him. I don't know about you, but I find that reassuring. Because sometimes we all feel like Jacob. We all feel a little bit lost. We all feel like we're on the run. We're all wondering if God still cares. And yet he does. He does more than we could ever imagine. So, what if God has been working in your life this whole time and you just didn't realize it? What if the place that you thought was your breakdown was actually where God was building something new? Don't miss what God's doing because you don't see it yet. How many times in your life have you looked back at situations, have you looked back at circumstances and realized that God was working all the time? He set me up. He absolutely set me up. I mean, this led to this, and that led to this, and I met this person through a kingdom connection, and I met this person, and all of a sudden, you got a whole network around you that God set up. Jacob wakes up. Check it out in verse 16. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. Jacob wakes up. And decides, surely the Lord was in this place. I didn't even know it. Isn't that just like us? We get so wrapped up in our problems that we don't even realize that God's right here. He's not in another dimension. He's not way out there somewhere, transcendent something out there that you can't get to. He's right here. And we expect him to show up in church. We expect him to show up in a worship service. We expect him to show up in the big moments of life. But sometimes he shows up when we're sleeping on a rock in a desert at our lowest point. Verse 17, but he was also afraid. And he said, what an awesome place this is. It's none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. The next morning, Jacob got up very early, and he took the stone that he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. And then he poured olive oil all over it, and he named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. So Jacob does something interesting. He takes this rock, the rock that he was sleeping on, the pillow. And he pours oil all over it as a sign of worship. And he renames the place Bethel. It means house of God. I admire his enthusiasm. but it's a rock, y'all. It don't look like a church. It don't look like the house of God. But, if I slept on a rock and God showed me this dream and spoke to me, I would probably name it, I don't know, memory foam 2.0 or something. But he realized that the presence of God was there, and what he thought was ordinary, what he thought was just a normal, mundane place, God was there. It was sacred. And he realized something that changed his life. God wasn't just in the expected places. He's everywhere. Even in the middle of nowhere. Even in the middle of Jacob's mess. Even in the middle of yours. Verse 20. And if praise team wants to come on up, they can. When Jacob made this vow, then Jacob made this vow, if God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he'll provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar that I've set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God 1/10 of everything that he gives me. To me, this is a little bit interesting. If God will be with me and watch over me and give me food and clothes and bring me back safely, then the Lord will be my God. Now, don't this kind of sound like a teenager negotiating with their parents? If you let me stay up late and buy me pizza and don't ask questions about my grades, then I'll be a good kid. But it just seems like a strange request to me for a guy who spent the night watching a Stairway to Heaven and God speaking to him. But before we judge him too harsh, hadn't we done the same thing? God, if you'll just get me out of this mess, then I'll follow you. If you'll bless me with this job, then I'll be generous. I'll tithe, God, I promise, if you'll just give me this job. But here's the thing. God had already promised Jacob all these things. Jacob didn't need to negotiate. He just needed to trust him. And maybe that's our takeaway today. Instead of bargaining with God, what if we just simply believed him? What if we trusted that he's with us, that he provides, that his plans are good, even when we're lying on a rock in a desert?
Hi everyone, I'm Jada. I'm a part of the Liberty Hill Church community. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for taking the time to join us today. We love to keep in touch, so if you could hit the like and the subscribe button and turn on those notifications, that would be awesome. Also, if you have any prayer requests, or if you made the choice to invite Jesus into your life, or if you want to share something God has done for you, just text PRAY to the number on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you'd like to support our ministry financially, you can partner with us by visiting libertyhillchurch.org and clicking on Give. Can't wait to see you again soon.